In 2011, Forbes magazine named her the most powerful celebrity on the planet. Her television show had run for 25 years. Her show had reached 150 countries. She had interviewed presidents, world leaders, and the most famous human beings alive. She was worth $2.9 billion, and she had started with nothing. Not almost nothing, not close to nothing, nothing. January 29, 1954, Kosciuszko, Mississippi. A girl is born to a teenage mother and an absent father. She is given the name Orpah, a biblical name, but the nurse misspells it on the birth certificate. She becomes Oprah. She will grow up wearing potato sacks as dresses because there is nothing else. She will grow up without running water, without stability, without safety. At 6 years old, she is sent to live with her father in Nashville, then back to her mother in Milwaukee. She bounces between homes, between relatives, between worlds. At 9 years old, she is abused by a family member. She tells no one for years. She has no one to tell. At 13, she runs away from home. At 14, she gives birth to a premature baby boy. He does not survive. By any measure, by every measure, Oprah Winfrey's story should have ended there, in poverty, in trauma, in a Mississippi town that the rest of the world had forgotten. But there was one thing nobody could take from her: her voice. At 17, Oprah wins a local beauty pageant in Nashville. A radio station hears about it. They offer her a part-time job reading the news on air. She is paid to talk. She had found her lane. By 19, she has a full-time position at a black radio station. By the time she reaches her early 20s, she's co-anchoring the evening news on a Nashville television station, making her one of the youngest and first black female news anchors in the city's history. She should have been satisfied. By any standard, she had already defied everything, but she wasn't built for satisfied. In 1976, she is sent to Baltimore. A struggling talk show needs a co-host. The producers aren't sure she's right for it. She's too emotional, they say, too raw, too personal. Those were exactly the qualities that made her extraordinary. Oprah didn't interview people the way journalists did. She sat with them. She felt with them. When a guest cried, she cried. When they laughed, she laughed. She made every person watching at home feel like the conversation was happening in their living room. Ratings climbed, then kept climbing. In 1984, a local Chicago television station makes her an offer. She moves north to host a low-rated morning show called AM Chicago. Within 1 month, it overtakes the Phil Donahue Show in the ratings. Within 1 year, the show is renamed The Oprah Winfrey Show. In 1986, the show goes national. 120 cities, millions of viewers. In 1988, she negotiates ownership of her show. Full ownership. She becomes the first black woman in television history to own and produce her own talk show. She forms a production company. She names it Harpo, Oprah spelled backwards. She had just turned 34 years old. She had grown up in a shack with no running water, and she now owned a production studio in Chicago. The girl from Mississippi had become a mogul. But power invites opposition, and in 1996, the opposition arrived. During a segment on mad cow disease, Oprah makes a comment on live television. She says the topic has stopped her from eating another burger. The beef industry sues her. Not a single company, not an individual rancher, an entire industry. The lawsuit claims she defamed beef. They seek damages of more than $12 million. The trial is held in Amarillo, Texas, cattle country. The legal team believes the location will work against her. Oprah moves her entire show to Amarillo for the duration of the trial. She broadcasts from Texas. She will not hide. She will not be silenced. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury rules in her favor. She walks out of the courthouse and tells the crowd, "Free speech not only lives, it rocks." But that was only the first test. In 2009, after 25 years of one of the most successful television runs in history, Oprah announces she will end her show. Her ratings are still massive, her influence still enormous. People around her tell her she's making a mistake. She ends it anyway, because the next empire she wanted to build couldn't be built from someone else's platform. She launches OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, a full cable television channel, her own, completely. The early years are brutal. Ratings are poor. Critics declare the network a failure. The headlines are savage. The woman who had never failed publicly was failing publicly. And then she did what she had always done. She sat down with the pain. She examined it. She changed what needed changing. By 2013, OWN was profitable. By 2015, it was one of the fastest-growing cable networks in America. The failure had become the foundation of her next empire. So what can we take from the Oprah Winfrey story? 3 things, and they matter whether you have nothing or whether you already have something. First, your disadvantage can become your difference. Oprah was told she was too emotional for television, too personal, too raw. Those were meant as criticisms. She turned them into her competitive advantage. The thing they said was wrong with her was the thing that built a billion-dollar empire. Never let someone else define your weakness. Sometimes your greatest asset is hiding inside what they're telling you to fix. Second, own what you build. The moment Oprah negotiated ownership of her show, everything changed. Not the ratings, not the content, the ownership. The difference between being a talent and being a mogul is not fame, it is ownership. She didn't just perform, she owned. Ask yourself, in whatever you are building, are you performing for someone else's platform, or are you building your own? Third, failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the path. OWN failed publicly, and she stayed. She adjusted. She built. The networks that mocked the early OWN numbers went quiet by 2015. The story was never about the fall. It was always about what happened after. The girl who wore potato sacks built an empire worth nearly $3 billion. Not because she was lucky, not because she was given anything, because she understood something most people never learn. Your story doesn't have to end where it began. Oprah Winfrey built her empire through voice, ownership, and resilience. But next week, we tell a different kind of story. A man who grew up on the streets of New York, who made choices that could have destroyed him, who turned pain into a business empire worth $2.5 billion, and then rewrote the rules of what a black entrepreneur in America could become. Next week, Jay-Z, the blueprint of an empire. Subscribe and make sure your notifications are on, because the next story drops in 7 days.